Power isn't always a bespoke Italian suit or a diamond-encrusted watch. Sometimes it's a worn-out gray cashmere hoodie and the quiet, calculating patience of a man who owns the very ground you stand on. When a prejudiced gate agent at JFK's Terminal 4 decided a casually dressed black man didn't belong in her airline's elite first-class cabin, she thought she was protecting the prestigious image of Meridian Airlines. She had no idea she was actively insulting Arthur Sterling, the billionaire who had just finalized a 62% controlling acquisition of the parent company. By the time the final boarding call echoed through the concourse, careers would be abruptly ended, and a brutal, unforgettable lesson in karmic justice would be served cold. The fluorescent lights of John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 were a harsh contrast to the quiet, mahogany-paneled boardroom Arthur Sterling had occupied for the last 48 hours. At 38, Arthur was a titan in the private equity world, though you would never know it by looking at him. His fortune was built quietly, ruthlessly, and without the flashy fanfare of Silicon Valley tech bros or Wall Street inherited wealth. Through his holding company, Aegis Capital Group, he had just executed the most aggressive corporate takeover of the decade, acquiring a supermajority stake in Meridian Airlines, a legacy carrier bleeding money due to bloated management and catastrophic customer service. Arthur was exhausted. His attire reflected his fatigue. A muted, unbranded gray Loro Piana hoodie, which cost more than most people's monthly rent, but looked perfectly generic paired with comfortable dark slacks and well-worn leather traveling sneakers. He carried a single, scuffed leather duffel bag. He wasn't trying to make a statement. He simply wanted to get on his Boeing 777-300ER flight to London Heathrow and sleep in seat 1A. He navigated the bustling concourse, bypassing the chaotic food courts and duty-free shops, heading straight for the frosted glass doors of the Meridian Airlines Onyx Club. This lounge was the airline's sanctuary for the ultra-wealthy corporate elites and its highest-tier frequent flyers. Standing behind the pristine white marble reception desk was Brenda Carmichael. Brenda was a veteran of the airline industry, but somewhere along her 20-year career, she had adopted the staggering arrogance of the billionaires she occasionally checked in. To Brenda, the Onyx Club was her personal kingdom, and she was the ultimate gatekeeper. She prided herself on being able to read people, a skill heavily poisoned by her own deeply ingrained biases. As Arthur approached the desk, the automatic glass doors parted with a soft hiss. Brenda didn't immediately look up from her monitor. "Good evening," Arthur said, his voice a low, polite baritone. He set his phone on the desk, the screen brightly displaying his digital boarding pass with the unmistakable gold crest of a first-class Group 1 ticket. Brenda finally looked up. Her eyes immediately did a sweep of Arthur. They took in his black skin, his natural hair, the gray hoodie, the scuffed duffel bag, and the complete lack of visible designer logos. A microscopic sneer twitched at the corner of her lips, a tightening of the jaw that Arthur had seen 1,000 times in his life. "Sir," Brenda said, her voice dripping with that specific brand of corporate condescension, "this lounge is exclusively for Onyx Elite status members and ticketed first-class passengers. The MUNT terminal seating is back down the escalator to your left." Arthur didn't blink. He simply tapped his phone screen, pushing it closer to her. "I am ticketed in first class. Seat 1A, Flight 82 to Heathrow." Brenda sighed dramatically, picking up her barcode scanner. She aimed the red laser at the phone. The system let out a bright, cheerful beep, and the Amadeus Altia passenger service system on her monitor instantly flashed green, displaying Arthur's name and his confirmed 1A status. Brenda frowned at the screen. She hit the refresh key on her keyboard, her acrylic nails clacking aggressively. "Is there a problem?" Arthur asked mildly. "I need to verify this," Brenda muttered, narrowing her eyes at the monitor. "We've been having a lot of issues lately with third-party app spoofing. People taking screenshots of other passengers' tickets to sneak into the lounge." Arthur's eyebrows raised slightly. Spoofing? It's the official Meridian Airlines mobile app. You just scanned it. The CITA system clearly validated the PNR. Ow! And Brenda looked at him sharply, surprised that a man in a hoodie knew what the CITA system was. Before she could form a retort, the glass doors parted behind Arthur. "Excuse me, coming through. Move it, buddy." A loud, braying voice echoed in the quiet lobby. A man pushed past Arthur, brushing his shoulder aggressively. It was Preston Harrington. Preston was a walking cliché of mid-level corporate desperation. A sharply tailored but suspiciously shiny blue suit, slicked back hair, and an oversized gold watch that gleamed a little too brightly under the lounge lights. He was loudly barking into a Bluetooth earpiece about synergizing market deliverables. Brenda's demeanor transformed instantly. The condescension vanished, replaced by a radiant, sycophantic smile. "Mr. Harrington, welcome back to the Onyx Club. It is so wonderful to see you again." Yeah, Brenda," Preston huffed, slamming a silver loyalty card onto the marble desk. "Flight to London is delayed. I swear to God, if I miss my morning meeting in Canary Wharf, I'm calling the board of directors." "Oh no, Mr. Harrington, flight 882 is on time," Brenda cooed, swiftly scanning his card. The screen flashed. Preston was ticketed in premium economy, seat 14C. "Right this way. I'll have the bartender bring your usual scotch to the private, quiet area." Preston turned his head, casting a dismissive, sneering glance at Arthur. "You guys really need to start policing who wanders in here off the concourse, Brenda. Place is starting to look like a bus terminal." "I apologize, Mr. Harrington," Brenda said, looking directly at Arthur with icy finality. "I was just dealing with this." "Gentlemen." Preston smirked and walked into the luxurious depths of the lounge. Arthur stood perfectly still. The sheer audacity of the interaction was almost fascinating to him. If he wanted to, he could pull out his black card. He could pull out his passport. He could call the acting CEO of the airline, a man who had been literally sweating in Arthur's boardroom just 4 hours ago, begging to keep his job post-acquisition. But Arthur was a man who believed in deep structural rot. If Meridian Airlines was failing, it wasn't just because of bad route planning. It was because of a toxic culture that festered at the ground level. He needed to see exactly how far Brenda would go. "As I was saying," Brenda turned back to Arthur, her smile gone. "Your digital pass is flagged in our system. I cannot permit you entry into the lounge. I suggest you wait at the gate. If your ticket is actually legitimate, the gate agent will sort it out at boarding." "The gate agent?" Arthur repeated softly. "And what is your name?" "My name is Brenda, and I am the lead passenger service agent on duty," she said proudly, tapping her gold number tag. "Now please step aside. I have actual VIPs to attend to." "Understood, Brenda," Arthur said. He picked up his phone, his face an unreadable mask of calm. "I will wait at the gate." He turned and walked out of the lounge. He didn't walk away in defeat. He walked away like a predator who had just caught the scent of blood. Gate B14 was a chaotic sea of humanity. Business travelers angrily typed on laptops, families corralled exhausted children, and the distinct hum of airport anxiety filled the air. Arthur found an empty seat near a charging station, set down his duffel bag, and opened his laptop. He had an email to finish. It was addressed to the senior partners at Skadden Arps, the law firm handling the final regulatory filings for the Meridian acquisition, and CC'd to the transition team at Vanguard, who held a minority stake and were backing his play. "The structural financials are sound," Arthur typed, his fingers flying across the keys. "However, the customer-facing culture requires immediate and severe amputation. I am conducting an unscheduled, on-the-ground audit at JFK right now. Expect heavy personnel restructuring in the East Coast hubs by Monday morning." He hit send just as the PA system crackled to life. Good evening, passengers. Peridian Airlines Flight 882 to London Heathrow is now ready for boarding. We would like to begin by welcoming our first-class passengers, Onyx Elite members and active-duty military, to board through the priority lane. Arthur closed his laptop, slid it into his bag, and stood up. He walked towards the red-carpeted priority lane. As he approached the podium, he realized the universe had a dark sense of humor. Standing behind the gate desk, having apparently migrated from the lounge to oversee the flagship international departure, was Brenda. Arthur took his place at the front of the line. Before he could even present his phone, a heavy hand shoved into his bag. "Hey pal, didn't you hear the announcement?" It was Preston Harrington, smelling strongly of cheap scotch and expensive cologne. "This line is for first class. Route 1. You need to wait for Group 5 over by the trash cans." Arthur slowly turned his head. He looked at Preston's hand, which was still lingering at Arthur's shoulder, and then looked Preston dead in the eyes. Arthur's gaze was entirely devoid of anger, which made it terrifying. It was the cold, dead-eyed stare of a man who routinely dismantled billion-dollar corporations for sport. Preston instinctively took a half-step back, dropping his hand. Arthur turned back to the podium and stepped up to Brenda. He placed his phone on the scanner. The machine flashed green again. Brenda's face flashed with a mixture of annoyance and blatant indignation. She physically covered the scanner with her hand. "Mr. Sterling, is it?" Brenda said, her voice loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "I thought I made myself clear at the lounge. Your ticket has a fraud alert on it." "A fraud alert," Arthur said smoothly. "That is fascinating, considering the ticket was purchased through the American Express Centurion concierge desk directly from Meridian's corporate sales division." "I don't care what desk you claim you bought it from," Brenda snapped. "The system is rejecting your first-class priority. There is no way you are sitting in seat 1A. In fact, due to the discrepancy, I am required to downgrade your seat pending an investigation." Arthur watched as Brenda aggressively typed on her keyboard. She was manually overriding the sitter system, intentionally canceling his first-class boarding pass. The sheer maliciousness of the act was staggering. The printer behind the desk whirred to life. Brenda snatched the thin piece of cardstock and shoved it across the counter. "Seat 34E, Brenda said, a victorious smirk playing on her lips. "It's a middle seat in the back of economy, right next to the lavatories. It's the only seat left on the aircraft. You can take it, or you can stay in New York." Arthur looked at the printed ticket. He didn't touch it. "And what happens to seat 1A? Arthur asked quietly. "That is none of your concern," Brenda replied. Then, looking past Arthur, her face lit up. "Mr. Harrington, so sorry for the delay. As a token of our appreciation for your continued loyalty, and because we had a sudden cancellation, I would like to offer you a complimentary upgrade to seat 1A for this flight." Preston practically shoved Arthur aside to get to the desk. "Now that is what I call service." "Thanks, Brenda. Louis had my back." He snatched the first-class ticket, throwing a smug, mocking grin at Arthur. "Enjoy the back of the bus, buddy." Preston swaggered down the jet bridge. Arthur remained at the podium, unmoving. The economy passengers behind him were starting to murmur, sensing the tension. "Are you deaf?" Brenda hissed, abandoning all pretense of customer service. "Take the ticket and get out of my line, or I will have airport security remove you." "Brenda," Arthur said, his voice dropping an octave, carrying a weight that suddenly made the air of the anthem feel very heavy. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. You have just manually overridden a confirmed paid VIP itinerary based on your own personal prejudice. You have given my property to another passenger. I am going to ask you to summon your shift supervisor, your station manager, or whoever is in charge of this terminal. Right now, you are in no position to demand anything." Brenda shouted, slamming her hand on the desk. "You're holding up the line. Security." And hand, back, arm, head, Call the manager, Brenda, Arthur insisted, not moving an inch. Because if I have to make the call, your night is going to end significantly worse than you can possibly imagine. Brenda glared at him, her chest heaving. She picked up the heavy black walkie-talkie clipped to her belt. I need a supervisor and PAPT at gate B14 immediately. We have an aggressive, uncooperative passenger attempting to commit ticket fraud. Arthur finally smiled. It was a terrifying, humorless expression. Excellent. Within 3 minutes, the crowd at gate B14 had parted. Approaching the podium was Richard Gable, the night terminal manager for Meridian Airlines. Richard was a man who wore his meager authority like a king's robes. He had a perfectly pressed suit, slicked hair, and the distinct aura of a corporate ladder climber who despised dealing with actual passengers. Flanking him were 2 officers from the Port Authority Police Department, PAPD, their hands resting casually on their duty belts. The sight of the police caused a ripple of whispers among the waiting passengers. What seems to be the problem here, Brenda? Richard asked, completely ignoring Arthur and stepping behind the podium. Brenda leaned in, whispering frantically but loud enough for Arthur to hear. This man is trying to board with a fraudulent first-class boarding pass. When I caught the system error and offered him a reaccommodation in economy, he became belligerent and refused to leave the boarding area. He's threatening me. Richard finally turned his gaze to Arthur. He did the exact same visual sweep Brenda had done at the lounge. The hoodie, the sneakers, the skin color. The judgment was instantaneous and absolute. Sir, Richard said, puffing out his chest, my name is Richard Gable. I am the terminal manager. Meridian Airlines maintains a zero-tolerance policy for aggressive behavior toward our staff. You are going to take your assigned seat in 34E, or these officers are going to escort you out of the airport. Arthur stood his ground, casually slipping his hands into the pockets of his Loro Piana hoodie. Mr. Gable, before you commit to this course of action, I strongly advise you to log in to the master terminal directory. Check the PNR for Arthur Sterling. Look specifically at the internal company memo attached to the VIP code. Richard let out a short, condescending laugh. I don't need to look at anything. My lead agent has already made the determination. Your ticket was flagged. You do not belong in first class. Now you're going to walk down that jet bridge to economy, or are we doing this the hard way? One of the PAPTD officers, a seasoned cop with graying temples, stepped forward slightly. He looked at Arthur, noting the man's complete lack of agitation. The cop's instincts told him something was off. Aggressive passengers were usually yelling, sweating, or erratic. This man was as calm as a glacier. Sir, the officer said gently, it might be best to just step away from the podium. We don't want to have to make an arrest over an airline ticket. Officer, I appreciate your professionalism, Arthur said, turning to the cop with genuine respect. But I assure you, I am not the one breaking the law today. Meridian Airlines, however, is currently committing breach of contract, wire fraud, and systemic civil rights violations. Ah, for God's sake, Richard snapped, rolling his eyes. Arrest him. I want him removed from the terminal. He is formally denied boarding. Brenda smiled triumphantly from behind the desk. Hold on, the older officer said, raising a hand. He looked at Arthur. Sir, can I see your ID and the ticket? Arthur slowly pulled his wallet from his pocket. He didn't pull out a driver's license. He pulled out a solid black titanium American Express Centurion card and a diplomatic passport. He handed them to the officer. The officer opened the passport. He looked at the name, the credentials, and then down at the black card. The cop wasn't an idiot. He knew what a Centurion card meant. It meant infinite wealth. Mr. Pard. Sterling, the officer said, his tone shifting. Is there someone we can call to verify this? Actually, yes, Arthur said calmly. I was trying to avoid ruining the man's evening, but it seems I have no choice. Arthur pulled his phone from his pocket. He bypassed his contacts and dialed a number directly from memory. He put the phone on speaker and held it up. The phone rang twice before a panicked, breathless voice answered. Arthur, God, tell me the Skadden lawyers didn't find a poison pill in the contracts. The ink is barely dry. It was the voice of Julian. Wait, no. The voice of Thomas Bance. No, Bance is forbidden. The voice of Thomas Sterling. No, that's Arthur's last name. The voice of Thomas Harding, the acting chief executive officer of Meridian Airlines. Thomas, Arthur said, his voice echoing slightly in the quiet gate area. The contracts are fine. The Aegis Capital acquisition is locked. I am officially the majority owner of Meridian Airlines. Thank God, Harding breathed heavily on the other end. Congratulations, sir. Welcome to the helm. Brenda's face suddenly went entirely slack. The triumphant smile vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated horror. She looked at the speakerphone, then at Arthur, the blood draining from her cheeks until she looked like a ghost. Richard Gable froze. The arrogant puff of his chest deflated in real time. He stared at the phone in Arthur's hand as if it were a live grenade. Unfortunately, Thomas, I am not having a welcoming experience, Arthur continued smoothly, locking eyes with Richard. I am currently standing at gate B14 at JFK. Your terminal manager, a Mr. Richard Gable, and your lead gate agent, Brenda Carmichael, have just cancelled my first-class ticket, given my seat to another passenger, and called the Port Authority police to have me arrested for fraud. Dead silence fell over the phone line. The kind of heavy, suffocating silence that precedes an explosion. When Thomas Harding finally spoke, his voice was a trembling whisper of pure terror. They did what? The silence at gate B14 was absolute. The background noise of JFK Terminal 4, the roaring suitcases, the PA announcements, the crying children seemed to mute entirely, sucked into the vacuum of Thomas Harding's sheer panic broadcasting over the speakerphone. Richard Gable, a man who had spent his entire career climbing the middle management ladder of Meridian Airlines by kissing the right rings and crushing the people beneath him, looked as though he had been physically struck. His mouth opened and closed silently like a fish pulled onto a dock. Richard stammered, his eyes darting from the phone to Arthur's impassive face, and finally to the Port Authority police officers, who were now standing with their arms crossed, visibly enjoying the sudden shift in power dynamics. Arthur, please tell me you are joking. Harding's voice crackled through the phone, the digital compression unable to hide the tremor of a CEO who realized his golden parachute had just caught fire. Tell me this is a stress test. A horrific, unannounced stress test. It wasn't intended to be, Thomas, Arthur replied, his tone conversational, entirely devoid of the anger one might expect from a man facing forced arrest. But the results are undeniably illuminating. I am standing with a Mr. Richard Gable, your night terminal manager, and Brenda Carmichael, the lead agent. They have determined that my presence in the first-class cabin is a security risk. They have downgraded me to a middle seat in economy, given my purchased seat to a man who smells like a distillery, and summoned law enforcement to forcefully remove me for ticket fraud. Give him the phone, Harding snapped. The terror in his voice was instantly replaced by a lethal, desperate rage. Give the phone to Gable, now. Arthur didn't hand the phone over. He simply held it closer to Richard's face. Speak. Richard swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing erratically above his tightly knotted tie. Mr. Harding, sir. This is Richard Gable. There has been a massive misunderstanding. The system flagged the PNR. And Agent Carmichael, shut your mouth, Gable, Harding roared. The volume caused a few passengers in the boarding area to physically flinch. Do you have any idea who you are standing in front of? Do you comprehend the magnitude of your incompetence? Sir, the profile, the man standing in front of you is Arthur Sterling. Harding shouted, his voice echoing off the departure screens. He is the founder of Aegis Capital Group. As of 4 hours ago, his firm holds a 62% controlling stake in this airline. He is not a passenger, Gable. He is your employer. He owns the plane you are boarding. He owns the gate you are standing at. He owns the very desk you are cowering behind. Brenda's knees visibly buckled. She had to grab the edge of the boarding podium to keep from collapsing. The color had completely drained from her face, leaving her makeup looking like a grotesque mask painted on a corpse. The smug arrogance that had defined her entire shift was gone, replaced by the hollow, sickening realization that her career wasn't just over, it was being vaporized in front of an audience of 200 people. "Mr. Harding," Richard pleaded, his voice cracking into a high-pitched whine. "I was only following standard operating procedures." Brenda flagged the ticket as fraudulent. "We've had a rash of app spoofing, and his appearance didn't match the standard Onyx Elite demographic. I was protecting the airline's assets." It was the worst possible defense he could have mounted. Arthur's eyes narrowed infinitesimally. "His demographic?" Harding repeated, the word dripping with venom. "Did you actually just say that on a recorded line in front of the chairman of the board and the Port Authority police? You profiled him?" "No. No, sir. I meant, Gable, you are fired," Harding stated, the words dropping like anvils. "You are terminated effectively immediately for cause gross misconduct, insubordination, and blatant violation of federal civil rights statutes. Leave your security badge and your radio on the podium. You are not to access the terminal concourse again. HR will mail your final check and your sealed BRA paperwork. Mr. Harding, please. I have 20 years with this company. My pension is forfeit under the gross misconduct clause of your contract," Harding interrupted mercilessly. "Step away from the desk, Mr. Gable, before I ask Mr. Bodley Sterling to have those officers escort you out for trespassing." Richard stood, paralyzed for agonizing 3 seconds. He looked at the senior PAPT officer, who simply raised a single graying eyebrow and tilted his head toward the exit. Defeated, utterly broken, Richard unclipped his heavy radio and placed it on the desk. He pulled his gold ID badge from his lapel, his hand shaking violently, and dropped it next to the radio. Without looking at Brenda, Arthur, or the passengers, the former night terminal manager turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. "Arthur," Harding's voice returned, desperate for salvation, "Gable is gone. I will have the station director out of bed and at the gate in 20 minutes. I will personally fly to New York tomorrow." "That won't be necessary, Thomas," Arthur said, his voice calm again. "I'll see you in London on Monday. We have a lot to discuss regarding corporate culture." "And the gate agent?" Harding asked, a dark edge returning to his voice. "Carmichael?" Brenda let out a small, involuntary whimper. Tears were finally welling in her eyes, carving tracks through her foundation. She looked at Arthur, her hands clasped together as if in prayer. "I will handle Miss Carmichael," Arthur said quietly. "Good night, Thomas." Arthur tapped the screen, ending the call. The silence returned, thicker and heavier than before. The 200 passengers waiting to board Flight 82 were completely spellbound, watching a billionaire dismantle a corporate hierarchy in real time. Arthur looked at the 2 police officers. "Gentlemen, I apologize for wasting your time. It seems the fraud alert was a glitch." The older officer chuckled softly, shaking his head. "No apology needed, Mr. Sterling. It's been the most educational shift I've had in years. Have a safe flight." The cops tipped their hats and strolled away, clearly amused by the massacre they had just witnessed. Arthur finally turned his full, terrifying attention to Brenda. She was shaking. "Mr. Sterling," she sobbed, the words tumbling out in a desperate, disjointed rush. "Please, I am so sorry. I misjudged you. I made a terrible mistake. I have a mortgage. I have 2 kids in college. If I get fired for cause like Richard, I'll lose everything. Please, I'll do anything. I'll get on the PA and apologize to the whole terminal." Arthur studied her. He didn't feel petty, but he didn't feel the need to scream at her either. Anger was an emotional tax he rarely paid. He preferred efficiency. "Brenda," Arthur said, his voice quiet, forcing her to lean in to hear him. "You didn't make a mistake. A mistake is typing a V instead of a B on a keyboard. What you did was execute a series of deliberate, calculated choices based on a deeply flawed worldview. You looked at my skin, you looked at my clothes, and you decided I was fundamentally unworthy of the space I was standing in. You weaponized your petty authority to humiliate me. I know, she whispered, tears falling freely now. I was wrong. I was so wrong. I don't fire people on the spot, Arthur said methodically. I leave that to my executives. Your employment status will be reviewed by Human Resources on Monday. However, tonight you have a flight to board. Brenda blinked through her tears, confused. Sir? Sir? Arthur gestured to the keyboard. Log back into the Amadeus Altair system. Re-establish my PNR. Cancel the economy reassignment. Print my boarding pass for seat 1A. Brenda scrambled to comply, her acrylic nails clicking frantically against the keys, no longer sounding aggressive but terrified. The printer whirred, spitting out the heavy cardstock ticket. She handed it to him with trembling fingers. Now, Arthur said, taking the ticket, you are going to step out from behind that podium. You are going to carry my bag. And you're going to personally escort me down the jet bridge onto the aircraft and into the first-class cabin. Brenda swallowed, her eyes widening in horror as she realized what he was asking her to do. But, Mr. Harrington is in your seat. I gave him the upgrade. I know, Arthur said, a slow, predatory smile finally touching his lips. And you are going to be the one who tells him to get out of it. The walk down the jet bridge felt like a funeral march for Brenda Carmichael. She walked slightly ahead of Arthur, her shoulders hunched, both hands awkwardly gripping the handles of his scuffed leather duffel bag. Behind her, Arthur walked with the relaxed, even stride of a man taking a Sunday stroll through his own garden. The heavy-ribbed tunnel of the jet bridge connected to the massive fuselage of the Boeing 777-300ER. As they reached the aircraft door, Chloe, the lead first-class flight attendant, was waiting. She was a seasoned professional with immaculate grooming and a forced, stressed smile. "Welcome aboard, Mr." Chloe started, glancing at Brenda's tear-stained face and the heavy bag she was carrying. A professional smile faltered into genuine confusion. "Brenda, what's going on? Where is Mr. Gable?" "The cockpit just got a secure ACRS message from corporate saying we have a code red VIP boarding." "I am the code red," Arthur said smoothly, stepping past Brenda. He extended a hand. "Arthur Sterling." "Good evening, Chloe." Chloe's eyes dropped to the black titanium Centurion card Arthur had casually slipped behind his boarding pass, and then to the name Sterling. As a senior crew member, she read the financial memos. She knew exactly who he was. "Mr. Sterling," Chloe gasped, instantly standing at attention, her posture rigid. "Sir, it is an absolute honor. We had no idea you were flying with us tonight." "It was a last-minute addition," Arthur said warmly. "Please, just Arthur, and please don't let my presence disrupt your service." "Of course, sir. Right this way to seat 1A. Chloe trailed off, her eyes darting toward the front of the cabin. A look of deep, profound anxiety washed over her face. She leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Sir, there is a situation. Seat 1A is currently occupied. Mr. Harrington boarded 10 minutes ago with a gate-issued boarding pass for that suite. He has already demanded 3 glasses of Dom Perignon and is currently shouting at my junior flight attendant because the macadamia nuts aren't warm enough." Arthur let out a soft, dark chuckle. "Don't worry, Chloe. Agent Carmichael is here to correct her ticketing error." He placed a firm hand on Brenda's shoulder and gently pushed her forward. They stepped into the first-class cabin. Meridian Airlines had recently retrofitted their 777s. The cabin was a luxurious expanse of private mini-suites with sliding doors, slate-gray leather upholstery, and massive 4K entertainment screens. And there, holding court in Suite 1A, was Preston Harrington. Preston had his shiny suit jacket off, his tie loosened, and his stocking feet propped up on the bulkhead ottoman. He was aggressively waving an empty champagne flute at a young, clearly terrified flight attendant. I said warm, not room temperature. Preston brayed, completely oblivious to the other wealthy passengers settling into their seats, who were shooting him blares of absolute disgust. I am a platinum-tier shareholder-level elite. I basically pay your salary when I ask for Mr. Harrington. Brenda's voice cracked. It was a pathetic, reedy sound, devoid of all her former authority. Preston stopped mid-rant and looked toward the aisle. He saw Brenda, her face smeared with ruined makeup, holding a scuffed duffel bag. Then he looked behind her, and his eyes locked onto Arthur. A cruel, mocking sneer instantly spread across Preston's flushed face. "Well, well, well," Preston laughed loudly, gesturing with his empty glass. "Look what the cat dragged in. Brenda, honey, what is this? Did this guy cry to you at the gate until you gave him a pity upgrade? Don't tell me you put him in first class. The smell alone is going to ruin my flight." The entire cabin went dead silent. The blatant, unapologetic racism hung in the conditioned air like a toxic cloud. Chloe, the flight attendant, looked absolutely horrified. Arthur didn't react. He simply looked at Brenda and gave her a single sharp nod. "Bewit. Mr. Harrington," Brenda stammered, stepping forward. Her hands were shaking so badly she almost dropped Arthur's bag. "Sir, there has been a terrible mistake. The upgrade I issued you at the gate was invalid. That seat legally belongs to this gentleman. I'm going to have to ask you to vacate Suite 1A. Preston stared at her for 3 seconds before he burst into raucous laughter. "Are you out of your mind? You gave me this ticket, Brenda." "I'm already settled. I have a massive merger meeting in London tomorrow. You tell him to go back to economy where he belongs." "Sir, please," Brenda begged, tears threatening to spill again. "I will lose my job. You have to move. I can reseat you in your original premium economy seat." Preston's face darkened. The laughter vanished, replaced by explosive entitled rage. He slammed his champagne flute down on the console tray, the delicate crystal shattering into a dozen pieces. The young flight attendant jumped back with a gasp. "I am not moving anywhere," Preston roared, standing up in the suite, pointing a finger directly at Brenda's face. "I am Preston Harrington. I am the Executive Vice President of Acquisitions for Apex Global Freight. I spend $500,000 a year on this garbage airline. If you try to move me for this nobody in a hoodie, I will have your job. I will call your CEO, Thomas Harding, directly." I played golf with him. Arthur finally stepped out from behind Brenda. He moved smoothly, stepping over the shattered glass, until he was face to face with Preston. Despite Preston standing on the slightly elevated floor of the suite, Arthur was taller, and the physical presence of the billionaire was suffocating. "Apex Global Freight," Arthur said, his voice a low, vibrating hum that commanded the attention of the entire cabin. "You report to Marcus Thorne, the CEO." Preston blinked, thrown off balance that this casually dressed man knew his boss's name. "Yes, I do, and Marcus will rip this airline apart when I tell him how I'm being treated." Arthur reached into the pocket of his hoodie. He pulled out his phone. "That's an interesting theory, Preston. Let's test it. What are you doing?" Preston sneered, though a flicker of uncertainty finally crossed his eyes. "I am looking at the Series C funding portfolio for Apex Global Freight," Arthur said, tapping the screen. "Your company has been hemorrhaging capital for 3 quarters due to catastrophic supply chain mismanagement. Last month, your CEO Marcus came to a private equity firm in Manhattan begging for a $300 million bridge loan to keep Apex from filing Chapter 11 bankruptcy." Preston's face went pale. The blood drained from his cheeks just as quickly as it had drained from Brenda's at the gate. How do you know about the Series C?" "That's strictly confidential. That's under NDA." It's under NDA to outside parties, Arthur corrected coldly. But when you are the managing partner of the firm holding the debt, you have unrestricted access. The firm is Aegis Capital. I'm Arthur Sterling. Preston physically recoiled as if he had been punched in the chest. He fell backward, hitting the leather seat of the suite. Aegis. You're Arthur Sterling. I am, Arthur confirmed, and regarding your threat to call the CEO of this airline, Thomas Harding. You're a bit late. I just fired the terminal manager on speakerphone with Thomas 5 minutes ago, because as of today my firm also owns Meridian Airlines. The silence in the cabin was so profound you could hear the hum of the aircraft's APU generators. Now, Arthur said, leaning down slightly, bringing his face inches from Preston's sweating forehead, you have shattered glass in my suite. You have verbally abused my flight crew. You have made racially disparaging remarks to another passenger, and you have proven yourself to be a profound liability to a company I am currently deciding whether or not to liquidate. Preston was hyperventilating. Mr. Sterling. Arthur, sir, I had no idea. I was stressed about the meeting. Masso. The alcohol. Brenda, Arthur said, not breaking eye contact with Preston. Yes, Mr. Sterling. Brenda replied instantly, her voice trembling. Mr. Harrington is no longer flying to London, Arthur stated. He is a security risk. His behavior is erratic, violent, and abusive to the crew. Cancel his ticket entirely, revoke his Onyx Elite status. He is permanently banned from flying Meridian Airlines. You can't do that, Preston shrieked, panic finally taking full control. My meeting. If I'm not in London tomorrow, the merger falls through. Marcus will fire me. Marcus is going to fire you anyway, Arthur said, standing up straight, because my first call when we land at Heathrow will be to inform him that my bridge loan is contingent upon your immediate termination. Chloe. Yes, Mr. Sterling, the flight attendant answered brightly, practically glowing with satisfaction. Please call the Port Authority police, Arthur said smoothly, gesturing to the shattered glass. Tell them we have a belligerent squatter in Seat 1A who is refusing to disembark. The response time was less than 4 minutes. The heavy footsteps of law enforcement echoing down the jet bridge sounded like the steady, rhythmic beat of a war drum. When the 2 Port Authority police officers stepped through the bulkhead into the first-class cabin, the older, graying cop immediately locked eyes with Arthur. A wry, knowing smirk briefly flashed across the officer's face. Well, Mr. Sterling, the older officer said, hooking his thumbs into his duty belt, I see the ticketing glitch has relocated itself to Seat 1A. It appears so, officer, Arthur replied, stepping back to give the police a clear line of sight to the suite. Mr. Harrington here is occupying a space he does not own, and he has become hostile toward the flight crew. He is officially denied transport by Meridian Airlines. Preston Harrington was pressed so hard against the slate-gray leather of the seat that he looked as if he were trying to meld into the fuselage. The explosive, entitled rage that had fueled his tirade just moments ago had entirely evaporated, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated terror of a man watching his entire life disintegrate in front of a live audience. Officers, wait, please, Preston stammered, holding his hands up defensively as the 2 cops moved toward the suite. This is a massive misunderstanding. I'm a Platinum Elite member. I'm the Executive Vice President of Apex Global Freight. You can't drag me off this plane like a common criminal. Sir, stand up, the younger officer commanded, his voice devoid of any sympathy. He uncooked a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from his belt, the metallic clack echoing sharply in the quiet cabin. The airline has revoked your ticket. You are now trespassing on private property. If you do not stand up and walk out of this aircraft voluntarily, we will extract you by force, and you will be charged with resisting arrest alongside the trespassing and disorderly conduct. No, you don't understand. Preston practically shrieked, his slicked-back hair falling out of place, a sheen of frantic sweat coating his forehead. He turned his desperate gaze back to Arthur. Arthur, Mr. Sterling, please, This tall, ma'am. I am begging you, if I don't make that meeting in London tomorrow, my CEO will terminate me. I have a mortgage in the Hamptons. I have car payments. I will be ruined." "You ruined yourself, Preston," Arthur said, his voice a flat, unyielding monolith of absolute finality. "You walked into this airport tonight convinced that your wealth and your skin color gave you the divine right to trample over anyone you deemed beneath you. You shattered a glass at a young woman who was simply trying to serve you. You threw racial insults in a public setting. You are a walking liability, and my firm does not invest in liabilities." "Please," Preston sobbed, actual tears now streaming down his face, completely ruining his carefully crafted alpha male facade. "I'll sit in the back. I'll sit in the jump seat. Just let me fly. Cuff him," the older officer sighed, having lost all patience. The younger officer reached in, grabbed Preston by the bicep, and yanked him out of the suite with practiced, brutal efficiency. Preston yelped as his arms were wrenched behind his back. The cuffs ratcheted shut with a tight, unforgiving pinch. "Let's go, pal," the cop said, giving Preston a firm shove toward the aisle. What followed was the most agonizingly slow, humiliating procession of Preston Harrington's life. The other first-class passengers, tech billionaires, old money inheritors, and Hollywood executives watched in absolute disgusted silence as the weeping, handcuffed executive was paraded out. As they crossed the threshold into the main concourse, the passengers at gate B14, who had witnessed the initial confrontation, erupted into a smattering of spontaneous applause. Back in the cabin, the heavy silence slowly gave way to the soft hum of the aircraft. Arthur turned his attention to Brenda, who was still standing rigidly by the bulkhead, gripping his duffel bag so tightly her knuckles were white. She looked completely shattered. "Miss Carmichael," Arthur said quietly. Brenda flinched. "Yes, Mr. Sterling." "Put the bag down." She carefully placed the scuffed leather duffel on the carpet. "You begged me not to fire you," Arthur said, his tone conversational but carrying the weight of a judge passing sentence. "You told me you have children in college. You told me you have a mortgage." "I do," she whispered, looking at the floor. "I swear I do. I believe you. And because I believe you, I am not going to terminate your employment," Arthur said. Brenda's head snapped up, a flash of desperate, disbelieving hope illuminating her tear-streaked face. "Oh my God. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I swear you will never see me make a mistake like this again. I will undergo sensitivity training." "I will. Do not interrupt me," Arthur warned, the warmth instantly vanishing from his eyes. "You are not fired. But you are no longer a lead passenger service agent. You are no longer authorized to work at the Onyx Club, nor are you permitted to work any departure gate." Brenda's hope faltered. "Then, what will I be doing?" "Effective Monday," Arthur declared, "you are being permanently reassigned to the subterranean baggage claim office in Terminal 4. You will work the midnight to 8 a.m. shift. You will deal exclusively with lost luggage, angry tourists, and missing strollers. Your salary will be adjusted to the base union minimum for that role. You will learn over the next several years exactly what it means to serve the public. All of the public. If you do not accept this reassignment, you may resign." Brenda stood paralyzed. The basement baggage claim was the graveyard of the airline industry, a dark, windowless purgatory where careers went to die in a chorus of screaming passengers and misplaced Samsonite suitcases. But it was a job. It was a paycheck. I accept the reassignment, Mr. Bart. Sterling," she said, her voice hollow. "Good," Arthur said. "Now get a broom. Clean up the glass Mr. Harrington broke in my suite, and then get off my plane." Flight 882 pushed back from the gate exactly on time. As the massive twin GE90 engines roared to life, pushing the Boeing 777 down the runway and ascending into the dark, cloudy sky over the Atlantic Ocean, Arthur Sterling finally settled into the wide, slate-gray leather seat of Suite 1A. He unzipped his grey Loro Piana hoodie, folded it neatly, and placed it in the overhead compartment, revealing a crisp, perfectly tailored black t-shirt underneath. Chloe, the lead flight attendant, approached the suite with quiet reverence. She was carrying a silver tray, holding a crystal tumbler of Macallan 25-year-old Scotch, poured precisely 2 fingers high, neat just the way his confidential passenger profile requested. "Your Scotch, Mr. Sterling." Chloe smiled, her demeanor a perfect blend of professional courtesy and profound relief. "And on behalf of the entire flight crew, thank you. Mr. Harrington has been terrorizing our staff on the London route for 3 years. Arthur took the glass, returning her smile warmly. "You won't have to worry about him anymore, Chloe. And you won't have to worry about the toxic management style of this airline for much longer either. Changes are coming. We are looking forward to it, sir," she said before discreetly retreating to the galley. Arthur took a slow sip of the scotch, letting the rich, smoky liquid burn down his throat. He opened his laptop, the bright screen illuminating the darkened suite. He had work to do. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet, ruthless efficiency. By the time Arthur stepped into his London office in Canary Wharf on Monday morning, the corporate guillotine had already dropped. Thomas Harding, the acting CEO of Meridian Airlines, had formally submitted his early retirement paperwork, terrified of being ousted in a public board vote. A massive internal audit of the airline's customer service practices was launched, resulting in the immediate termination of dozens of middle managers who had perpetuated the discriminatory, toxic culture that Arthur had exposed. At 9 a.m. London time, Arthur made a single phone call. He dialed the direct cell phone number of Gregory, the chief executive officer of Apex Global Freight. "Arthur." Gregory answered on the first ring, his voice dripping with forced corporate cheerfulness. "Great to hear from you. I assume this call means the bridge loan from Aegis Capital is fully approved? We are ready to sign the term sheets." "The capital is secured, Gregory," Arthur said smoothly, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office at the grey London skyline. "However, I am triggering the morality clause in the Series C term sheet. My firm requires a mandatory restructuring of your executive leadership team before the funds are released." "Restructuring?" Gregory asked, the panic suddenly evident in his voice. "Arthur, we run a tight ship. Who do you want gone?" "Preston Harrington," Arthur said simply, "Executive Vice President of Acquisitions. I want him terminated for cause, immediately. I want his severance voided, and I want a public statement issued distancing Apex Global from his personal conduct." There was a heavy pause on the line. Gregory was calculating the cost. "Arthur, Preston is a top earner. Can I ask why?" "You can read the Port Authority police report from JFK Terminal 4, which is currently being leaked to the New York Post," Arthur replied coldly. "He was arrested in handcuffs on an aircraft I owned for racial abuse, property destruction, and trespassing. If he is still employed by Apex Global Freight at noon today, the bridge loan is cancelled, and I will personally short your company's stock into the ground before lunch." "He's gone," Gregory said instantly, entirely abandoning his top earner. "Consider him terminated as of this second." "Not sort up. Mort." Arthur hung up the phone. He sat back in his chair, the quiet hum of his London office entirely different from the chaotic energy of JFK. Justice, he mused, was rarely swift, and it was rarely poetic. But when you held the keys to the kingdom, you had the absolute power to manufacture it. Preston Harrington was ruined, blacklisted from the skies, stripped of his wealth, and publicly humiliated. Brenda Carmichael was currently clocking into a dark basement in Queens, learning the agonizing value of humility, one lost suitcase at a time. And Meridian Airlines was finally under the control of a man who understood that true power wasn't about who you stepped on to get to the top. It was about how you treated the people standing beside you. What happens in the dark always comes to the light, especially when you underestimate the quiet observer in the room. This story is a brutal reminder that arrogance and prejudice are the ultimate career killers, and you never truly know who you are, disrespecting until the bill comes due. Arthur Sterling proved that real wealth isn't loud, and true power doesn't need to shout to be heard, it simply acts. If this story of instant karma, corporate justice, and the ultimate airport reality check kept you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button. We love bringing you these intense real-life lessons in humility. Don't forget to share this video with a friend who loves a satisfying revenge story, and hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next dramatic deep dive. Let us know in the comments, what would you have done if you were Arthur? Stay humble, and we'll see you in the next one.